On December 24, 1994, at Houari Boumediene Airport in Algeria, Air France Flight 8969 was preparing for departure to Paris. 4 individuals, claiming to be police officers from the Algerian Presidential Guard, boarded the aircraft. They wore uniforms bearing the logo of Air Algerie and presented identification to the crew. 2 of them began checking the passengers' travel documents. 1 entered the cockpit, and the 4th stood guard at the cabin entrance. A veteran flight attendant noted that these police were armed, and 1 even had dynamite visible, which she found unusual since Algerian police did not typically carry arms during routine checks. At this point, airport staff noticed that Flight 8969, which should have been taxiing towards the runway, was inexplicably stationary on the tarmac. Consequently, members of the Special Intervention Group, codenamed Ninja, approached the aircraft. Upon noticing the approaching police forces, the 4 supposed officers brandished their weapons, declaring the plane hijacked. They were jihadists, demanding the establishment of an Islamic state in Algeria, and had chosen to hijack the Air France flight as a statement against the French infidels in Abderrahmane Meziane Sharif, the Algerian Minister of the Interior, arrived at the airport control tower to commence negotiations with the hijackers, who communicated through the aircraft's captain. They demanded the release of 2 leaders of the Islamic Salvation Front political party, Abbassi Madani and Ali Belhaj, who were under house arrest. In response, Sharif insisted that the hijackers begin releasing children and the elderly if they wish to engage with the Algerian government. Meanwhile, the media started gathering at the airport to cover the unfolding crisis. By noon, the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Alain Juppé, had organized a crisis team meeting. The French Minister of the Interior, Charles Pasqua, urgently met with his aides to strategize. French Prime Minister Edouard Balladur was called back from his Christmas vacation in Chamonix, along with other government officials. Communication between French officials and the Algerian government revealed differing approaches. While Algerian authorities wanted to resolve the crisis by force and strike against the terrorists, French officials sought a more cautious approach. At one point, the hijackers even abandoned their demand for the release of the FIS party leaders. 2 hours into the hijacking, the hijackers demanded that the captain start the engines and fly to Paris, intending to hold a press conference there. The captain explained that takeoff was impossible since the aircraft's boarding stairs were still attached, and Algerian authorities had blocked the runway with parked vehicles. When the hijackers demanded that the Algerian government remove the boarding stairs, the authorities refused, with Algerian officials maintaining a firm stance and refusing to comply with any demands from the hijackers. The hijackers then declared that unless the Algerian authorities obeyed their commands, they would detonate the aircraft. The hijacking team was led by the notorious terrorist Abdullah Yahia, affiliated with the armed Islamic group, Group Islamic Armée. The group was armed with an AIMR assault rifle, a micro-Uzi submachine gun, a Makarov pistol, a USP pistol, grenades, and 2 explosive packs. The hijackers quickly separated the passengers by gender, demanding all women cover their heads with veils or, if unavailable, with blankets. They covered the windows and used the pilots' jackets to deceive Algerian police snipers positioned outside. While the hijackers were pretending to be police checking passports, they identified one of the passengers as an Algerian police officer. To compel the Algerian government to comply with their demands, this officer was chosen as a victim. The hijackers approached him and instructed him to follow them. They shot the officer in the head at the top of the boarding stairs, and his body tumbled down the steps. He was the first casualty of the incident, and initially, most of the passengers and the flight crew on Flight 8969 were unaware that the man had been killed. Captain Delhem later recalled that he had asked the hijackers to allow a flight attendant to bring him some water into the cockpit. As the attendant handed him the water, she whispered that they had killed a passenger. Even after executing a passenger, the Algerian government still refused to assist in facilitating the plane's takeoff. Consequently, the hijackers selected a second victim, Bouijiang To, a 48-year-old Asian man who was a commercial attaché at the Vietnamese embassy in Algeria. The hijackers believed that killing a foreign diplomat would exert sufficient pressure on the Algerian government. Aware of the earlier execution, Boumediene too thought his diplomatic status might afford him preferential treatment for early release. However, as he approached the boarding stairs, the hijackers shot him in the back of the head, killing him instantly. The French government was fully aware of the situation in Algeria, and they told Algerian officials that if a military solution was needed to resolve the crisis, they requested that French military or police forces be allowed to carry out the assault. However, the Algerian government refused any French military personnel from undertaking missions on Algerian soil. Consequently, the French Prime Minister put pressure on the Algerian government, urging them to allow Air France Flight 8969 to take off and fly to France. The plane, being a French aircraft, fell under the complete jurisdiction of the French government in terms of international law for crimes occurring on it. Moreover, over 1/3 of the passengers and all the crew members were French. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere was not as tense, mainly because the vast majority of the people were unaware that 2 executions had taken place. The captain and the crew members, knowing what had happened and that 2 people had been killed, decided to handle the situation with professional poise. They attempted to communicate with the hijackers, understand their demands, and try to calm them down to prevent further execution of passengers. In France, after diplomatic negotiations, the Spanish government allowed French special forces to head to Majorca, Spain. This location is very close to Algeria, and should diplomatic agreements be reached, the French assault team could immediately reach Houari Boumediene Airport in Algeria. A unit of the French Gendarmerie intervention group flew to Majorca aboard an Airbus A300, the same model as the hijacked Flight 8969, specifically chartered by Air France. Upon arrival, they used this aircraft to rehearse their assault plan and continuously practice the execution of the attack. However, diplomatic negotiations soon revealed that Algeria did not welcome the presence of the French military on its soil, which was not surprising. On December 25th, French diplomats in Algeria received intelligence from a source inside the Algerian Special Services indicating that the hijackers' request to fly to Paris was not to hold a press conference, but to crash the plane into a famous building in Paris. This revelation greatly alarmed senior French officials. In Algeria, the hijackers released some women with children, and others who appeared to be in poor condition. Still, over 170 people remained on board. The hijackers also planned to release all Algerian nationals, but to their surprise, almost all the Algerian passengers refused to leave the plane. They believed that if they left, the hijackers would kill the remaining French passengers and crew members. Algerian police identified the main hijacker as Abdullah Yahya. Consequently, the Algerian government had Yahya's mother come to the scene to plead with her son to release the passengers. However, this move only angered Yahya. In an attempt to force the Algerian government to comply, they had one of the passengers, a French chef named Boumediene, inform the control tower via a microphone that unless the plane was allowed to take off by 9:30 p.m., a passenger would be executed every half hour. At 9:30 p.m., Chef Boumediene was shot and his body was thrown from the plane. Boumediene was a chef at the French embassy in Algeria. To prevent further loss of life among the passengers, the French government exerted significant political pressure on the Algerian government, which eventually allowed the aircraft to depart for France. Due to low fuel, the plane planned to land in Marseille to refuel before continuing to Paris. By this time, the GIGN unit had returned from Majorca, Spain to Marseille and began preparing for an assault. At 3:33 a.m. on December 26th, Air France Flight 8969 landed at Marseille Provence Airport. Unaware that their plans were known to the French, the hijackers still hoped to refuel and continue to Paris, leading to some complacency on their part. The French government deliberately directed the plane to a secluded corner of the airport and displayed a cooperative demeanor to buy time. The hijackers requested 27 tons of fuel, although only 9 tons were needed to fly from Marseille to Paris. They explained that after holding a press conference, they would fly the plane to an Islamic country. However, the French government understood that the excess fuel would increase the destructive impact in the event of a crash. Passengers released in Algeria had also informed the police that there were bombs on board, leading the French government to decide that the assault operation must be executed in Marseille. The French police, under the guise of delivering food and water and maintaining the aircraft, allowed special forces members disguised as airport personnel to install listening devices on the plane. Through these devices, they learned the positions of the hijackers and whether booby traps had been installed. The French government also deceived the hijackers by suggesting that a small press conference could be held in Marseille directly on the plane. The hijackers agreed to this proposal and cleared a large area in the front of the plane for the press conference. However, they soon became angry and suspicious when no journalists appeared, feeling that the French police were plotting something. Consequently, the hijackers ordered the pilot to taxi the plane to a position in front of the control tower. This change of position disrupted GIGN's original plan, requiring a redeployment of snipers and reconnaissance devices. At the appointed time, the French government did not refuel the plane, and the hijackers, realizing they had been tricked, became desperate. They decided to execute a fourth passenger and began firing from the cockpit windows at the control tower, shattering its glass. As the situation escalated, GIGN Commander Favier received authorization to launch an assault at any time. Favier's plan involved deploying 3 assault teams. 2 teams, each with 11 members, would attack the rear doors on both sides of the aircraft, while a third team of 8 would assault the right front door. They would approach the aircraft using standard airport boarding stairs. In front of the plane, facing the cockpit, a group of snipers was positioned. If the hijackers appeared in the cockpit, the snipers could neutralize them. The assault teams were equipped with GIGN's standard gear, wearing dark blue combat uniforms and helmets fitted with bulletproof glass visors that could withstand handgun bullets and bomb fragments. Their bulletproof vests, equipped with ballistic plates, could protect against 7.62 bayonet NATO rifle bullets. Leading the assault in traditional GIGN fashion, one operator carried a Manurhin MR-73 revolver, typically with a 5.25-inch barrel, chosen for its reliability without the risk of jamming or misfires. This operator also carried a 9mm SIG P228 semi-automatic pistol to continue fighting after the 6 rounds of the revolver were spent. The GIGN members behind the leading assaulter were equipped with MP5 submachine guns, firing 9mm pistol rounds, or more powerful carbines firing 5.56mm rifle bullets, providing substantial firepower. Originally, the plan was to initiate action in the evening, but as the hijackers began shooting at the control tower, it became evident they had lost control. Consequently, Favier decided to commence the assault immediately. When 3 boarding stair vehicles filled with assault team members appeared on the runway, the hijackers knew their final moments had arrived. They opened fire on the assault teams with AIMR rifles. The 2 assault teams attacking the rear side entrances of the aircraft progressed smoothly. They entered the plane without resistance, since all hijackers were concentrated in the front, allowing them to quickly evacuate the 169 passengers. However, the team assaulting the front entrance encountered difficulties. First, since the hijackers were all in the front, they focused their gunfire on the 8-member team attacking the front entrance. Secondly, the height of the boarding stair vehicle did not match the front entrance of the Air France Flight 8969, being higher than the aircraft's door. This discrepancy was due to the assault team's practice on a similar model Airbus A300 that was not loaded with any heavy luggage, whereas Flight 8969 had its luggage concentrated in the forward cargo hold, putting extra pressure on the landing gear and lowering it by several centimeters. This oversight meant the higher stair vehicle blocked the cabin door, preventing it from opening. The stair vehicle had to back up a meter, and one assault team member had to jump up forcefully to push open the cabin door, nearly falling several meters down the stairs. All 4 hijackers were concentrated in the cockpit, along with the captain, co-pilot, and flight engineer, making 7 people crammed into the small space. The first assault team member to reach the cockpit door encountered the first hijacker face to face. In a split second, the GIGN member raised his weapon and shot the hijacker dead. Entering the cockpit, he immediately saw another hijacker standing to the side and without hesitation, shot and killed the second hijacker. However, this team member did not anticipate that all hijackers were in this location. The other 2 hijackers were crouching behind the seats on the right side of the cockpit, thus remaining unseen by the sniper team providing oversight. One of them fired an AIMR rifle upward at the GIGN member, hitting his hands and legs with multiple 7.62mm rifle bullets. Had it not been for his bulletproof vest with ballistic plates blocking several vital shots to the torso, he would have died on the spot. Ultimately, a 9mm Makarov pistol bullet struck his bulletproof visor, shattering it but sparing him a fatal blow. Severely injured, the GIGN member collapsed at the doorway of the cockpit, incapacitated. Additional GIGN members followed, attempting to rescue the severely injured team member. In the cramped corridor, they were met with a barrage of fire from AIMR rifles, resulting in 2 more team members getting wounded. The hijackers began to shoot through the cockpit walls at the assault team members outside, forcing them either to fall back beyond the boarding stairs or to retreat towards the middle of the plane. The hijackers also threw grenades, which, although causing limited damage, filled the front of the plane with smoke, obscuring the assault team's ability to differentiate between the hijackers and the passengers. The initial group of team members, equipped only with revolvers, were completely outgunned by the hijackers wielding assault rifles. Opposite the cockpit, a sniper team had the opportunity to eliminate the hijackers inside. However, the presence of the co-pilot between the 2 hijackers made it difficult for the snipers to find a clear shot. Finally, an unexpected turn of events occurred when the co-pilot, taking advantage of the remaining hijackers' distraction during the firefight, opened the window and jumped from the cockpit 5 meters above the ground. The co-pilot's escape surprised the hijackers. It was said that the hijackers had the opportunity to kill the remaining pilot and engineer, but ultimately chose not to. Perhaps believing themselves to be holy warriors, they refrained from senseless killing out of a sense of honor, or possibly there was mutual respect between them and the pilot that prevented them from taking the crew's lives. After the co-pilot fled, the pilot and the engineer crouched behind their seats to avoid being hit by stray bullets. The vacated space allowed the opposing snipers to target and kill one of the hijackers. Now, only one hijacker remained. He made a final prayer, then threw a pipe bomb, creating a loud explosion and thick smoke. As he stepped out of the cockpit, he saw a GIGN team member charging up the boarding stairs with a pistol. The hijacker fired at the team member, hitting the pistol, which exploded from the impact of the bullet. Although the pistol saved the team member's life, it also caused him to tumble down the stairs. At this point, the team members in the middle of the plane advanced, and several pistols fired simultaneously at the last hijacker standing at the cabin entrance. He was hit by multiple bullets and died on the spot. Since the GIGN members were uncertain whether any hijackers remained in the cockpit, they continued firing until the flight engineer, using the plane's intercom, shouted that all the hijackers were dead and only French nationals remained. This halted the gunfire. All the hijackers had been killed. The passengers and crew members survived the 20-minute gun battle. Among the passengers, 13 sustained minor injuries. Of the 30 GIGN members, 9 were injured, with 1 seriously. 3 crew members were wounded. The captain was shot in the right elbow and thigh. The engineer was lightly wounded. The bodies of 2 hijackers shielded them from further gunfire. The co-pilot, who had jumped from the window, suffered the most severe injuries, with fractures to his elbow and thigh from the 5-meter fall. This battered Airbus A300 was eventually decommissioned. This is the story of the bloody hijacking of Air France Flight 8969 in 1994. This is the History and Weapons channel. Please subscribe and support me. Your support is immensely valuable to me.